Have you ever thought that maybe all of these systems are just putting you in another box? I'm talking about astrology, human design, and gene keys, that they're basically just giving your ego something to be happy with as you go about reinforcing yet another identity, one that's just maybe slightly a little bit more polished. Well, what if I told you that I do believe that's true, and also that using your chart and the information in these systems in the right way can be extremely helpful for you, and how it ties into something called quantum jumping, which basically allows you to go into a better reality for yourself. And if done right, it can help you create a life beyond your wildest dreams. So let's dive in. My mentor once said something very interesting that stuck with me for a long time. You cannot change the world, but you can change the world that you're in. My mentor, he was quite a guy. He was a quantum physicist, a spiritual teacher. He had worked in the astral projection division of the US Army back in the 60s. So he was quite the cat. And he had actually he spent tons of time building these crazy devices that would actually allow you to travel interdimensionally between universes, or so he said. This is supposed, of course. Well, naturally, when somebody makes a claim like that and they have a resume like his, you start to say maybe there could be something to it. So at least you keep an open mind. And I didn't assume he was BSing me. Well, so I couldn't resist a big claim like this. And so I tried one of these devices. I got a hold of it, and lo and behold, my life did change immensely. It did work. Maybe not exactly how I thought it would, but you can, hindsight is always 20/20, foresight not so much. So let me just give you a brief picture of my life at the time. And I'm also going to relate this to your chart and astrology, because this all ties in here. So at this time, I was living in Calgary, Canada. And I was living a life with a lot of cold weather. It was busy. It was a very work-driven life. I was quite lonely, and I spent most of my time working 90-hour weeks in industrial camps that I called minimum security prisons up in northern Canada. I was doing environmental assessments in one of the most environmentally degraded places on Earth, the Athabascan tar sands. Maybe you've heard this. They literally mine oil up in northern Canada. And as a result of that, and the scope of their oil mining activities, there's a lot of environmental issues. And I was one of the guys going in there and investigating this and doing studies and surveys. And at the time, I had to stay in the same camps as the oil workers, the guys who were driving the oil trucks. And let me say, not exactly my ideal company. And the conditions around these camps were very strict because, well, they kind of had to be. These guys often were from rough and tumble backgrounds, or, any rules they could bend, they would. So they had to really lay down the law there. And so it felt like a minimum security prison. It wasn't a very fun place to be. So at the same time as all this was going on, I was longing for warm weather. I really wanted a spacious life and the ability to be around like-minded community, not, these guys who spend their lives working in their spare time, skidooing and snowmobiling and drinking a lot of alcohol and using other substances too. I'm not saying they're all like this, but this is, the generalized sort of homogenized attitude that went into a lot of these work camps. A lot of great people too, but what they were interested in was a little bit different than me. I was quite into spirituality at the time. I was quite into, exploring these concepts of the unseen world of cause and effect. And it was difficult for me to kind of find those people in those camps. So I read my tropical Western astrology chart on my own, and I understood the themes it contained enough to know that I should be entrepreneurial and that I would likely find my success overseas from my homeland of Canada. So this kind of gave me some ideas that I never considered before. I'm like, how do I leave Canada? Like, I have to live here my whole life. Well, funny enough, when you look into this, sometimes your mind can open up to different ideas. I also thought, how could I live without a job? I had no other way of making income. So these things I saw in my chart kind of planted seeds. Earn money overseas, live overseas, and become entrepreneurial. So I was also playing around with something else at the time too. And that was basically this device my mentor created. So what it was I'll kind of make it sound easy, but it created a very meditative brainwave state by taking latent radio waves, smashing them together into a resulting delta wave, propagating them through a circuit that had basically copper wire around quartz crystals that you hold, and your body would become part of the circuit, and it would entrain your entire body into a very calm meditative resonance. And then you would listen to these tracks that would slowly teach you how to navigate parallel realities. And the point of the tracks was that you would navigate a parallel reality and learn how to navigate parallel realities to find a reality that wasn't on the brink of destruction, that wasn't, imposing conditions upon you that would be prohibitive to you expressing who you want to be. So you're meant to find a reality that was quite ideal for you, both the environment, also what was going on in that reality, and your ability to express yourself. So that was sort of the coordinate or the endpoint of this program. And the longer that I used these tracks in this program, the more that things would shift in my life. So believe it or not, it did work. You could say that, whether it was exactly the mechanism that he said, or it was because, thoughts create reality, and my mind was now focused on this reality that I wanted to bring about. There's various explanations for this. But out of nowhere, basically one day, I got a call from a headhunter for an all expenses paid job in Australia that had more money than I was currently making. At the same time, even in Canada, I began meeting new friends that shared similar values. I began developing my healing skills. I was taking really interesting courses that just came into my awareness, and coaching skills as well. Some of these from courses, and some of them were just kind of instinctual and arising. So the other thing that was quite interesting is the longer that I engaged this program, I would just sort of learn new skills that I never had. The explanation was that I was tapping into parallel lives where I'd already developed that skill and bringing it back into the one I was currently aware of. So in a matter of months, my life changed drastically. And funny enough, it all happened in a way that was very similar to how I had initially envisioned it. So you could say that I had the coordinates of where I wanted to be, and then I quantum leapt towards those coordinates from the life that I was previously existing in into the life where I wanted to be. And this here, similar to the exact potential that an astrology or human design chart or gene keys profile holds. So this is the coordinates of what you could become. So if you believe in something strong enough and you take action accordingly, it will come true. But often we need some direction because inherently we carry conditioning, or we don't believe that something is possible for us because it's coming from the mind. So this conditioning may cause us to set the bar too low. And an example of setting the bar too low would be oh, I really wish I had a life where I attracted $100,000 so that I could not have the financial pressures that I'm experiencing right now. And then, well, let's say you do get some money, but you don't know how to hold it, or it comes as quickly as it goes because you're setting the bar too low for yourself. You're basically asking for something that is much lower than the thing that you really desire or need. It's not actually about the money. It's actually about the experience or the conditions of your life. So when you get the money, it's sort of like you don't actually get the deeper need. And by not getting the deeper need met, the whole thing falls apart and it invites you to try again. So you don't want to go through that experience, of course, because that seems like a waste of time and energy. So on the other hand, we might have some sort of a wounded fantasy that ends up playing out. We might have some sort of revenge fantasy where we show somebody that, bullied us earlier in life. We show them how great we are, and it becomes sort of this thing that's all kind of tied up with proving or unmet childhood needs, or, sometimes people have these sexual fantasies that play out and then it actually creates problems in the long run. So ideally, we need to have a coordinate that is healthy. It's balanced, and it will serve us in the long run. We don't want to basically just set the bar too low and get some need met that eventually dissolves, or we don't want to go into some sort of deluded fantasy that ends up creating more problems. So oftentimes, we simply can't go from wherever we are now to that ideal reality. It's not a one-stop trip. And I'm going to use an example here. We need to have a couple milestones or stopovers. So let's think of this as an analogy. So think of it as a long distance journey with some stopovers. So if you were to take a plane, let's say, from London to Bangkok in Thailand, then you probably can't take a direct flight. You'd probably have to stop over somewhere. Similarly, if you wanted to go from your current life right now, which let's say has a lot of challenges and compromises, into your ideal reality, you would probably need a couple stop-offs along the way to make it more gradual and more attainable and accessible for you. That kind of gap between where you are and your ideal reality might be too big, so it might be good to set the gap smaller at something more attainable. If you've heard me talk about the tropical zodiac versus the true sidereal zodiac, you'll understand how the tropical zodiac describes how to get out of the matrix, and the true sidereal zodiac shows us who we think we really are at a deeper level. But of course, you might hear me say this in a minute, still is a box, right? There still is a matrix within a matrix, albeit one that is freer, bound by less laws, more unified, more holistic. So you have to understand here that the tropical zodiac, in my experience, is like deconditioning from the matrix. Step one, stop over one. The true sidereal zodiac is stop number 2. So it's sort of a bigger scope. It's more of who we are, but ultimately you get to define who you really are after that. And if you can do that beforehand, great. I'm just giving you a couple coordinates along the way that can make things happen faster, more smoothly, and more easily, at least in my experience. So I still think charts are a very, very good thing for people. I still think readings are excellent for people, but they need to know when to use them and when to let go of them. So back to our analogy here. So if we're flying from London to Bangkok, and let's say there was a stopover in Istanbul. And let's also just say it was winter, so it's January. So London is cold and dreary and miserable, and Istanbul is warmer and sunnier than London. So it's a step up, basically. And Bangkok, of course, is tropical and hot, and there's beaches and all that kind of stuff. So basically, the way that I see this analogy is you have London, which is your current life now, you have Istanbul, which is your tropical astrology chart, and then you have Bangkok, which is your true sidereal chart. So both these cities are coordinates on a map. However, they do not describe what happens to you after you get off the plane in Bangkok and start to explore. So you can see here that we have a one stop, which should be your focus when you're back in London in the dreary, cold winter weather. And Istanbul, getting to Istanbul is your first priority, and then Bangkok. And then when you get off the plane in Bangkok, obviously you're going to explore. Maybe you go to one of the islands. Maybe you go to Koh Phangan. Maybe you go somewhere else. Maybe you go to some beautiful beach place where you can just relax and just enjoy yourself, right? Well, I'm not going to rob you of that. And I don't think there is any chart that can actually show you the progression that happens afterwards. And that is something that's very far out and advanced anyway, and something that's left for you to explore. So there's no way I can even rob you of the joy of figuring that out for yourself. That's something you've got to do when you're ready. So tropical human design, like I said, is like Istanbul. So it sort of is our focus. When you're starting off and you're kind of like bumbling through the world and you're bumping into things and you're running into challenges and problems that are sort of a matrix nature, that one can get you very good at basically, deconditioning from that first layer of the matrix. At this point, I can often tell with people too, whether they'll resonate more with a tropical human design and astrology reading, or if they'll resonate with a true sidereal reading. Because if people need that deconditioning process, they're not going to really resonate with their true sidereal. They're going to look at that and go like, who is that? Because it's talking about a layer of themselves that's much deeper. And they're still aware of the superficial layers. So when you're aware of the superficial layers, you want to learn how to work with those and work through those and harmonize those. So I often have to calibrate, is this reading going to be good is a tropical reading going to be good for this person, or is a true sidereal reading going to be good for this person? Because if they don't resonate with the true sidereal reading, they're not going to get much value out of it until they have worked with their tropical chart and they have come up to the point where they're actually finding those limitations that are inherent in the tropical chart. So in the tropical chart, it contains it will get you to a point. And oftentimes the people I work with are people who have gotten to a point with a tropical chart and they said, it's not giving me any new information. I feel like it's recreating an older version of myself. What next? And then I show them the true sidereal and they're like, oh my God, this really feels like me. It does, because it's describing you on a deeper level without the influence of the precession of the equinoxes, which is in fact a mechanism for how the matrix gets reinforced. And I will cover this in another video because it's fascinating stuff. So if you don't want to get ahead of people and you don't want to start telling them about this second leg of the flight until they've boarded the first plane. So once they're on the first plane, that's generally when you pull out your second ticket, you look at that and go, okay, how long is this layover? Can I get some food? What do I need to know? What gate do I go to? That type of thing. Then you can start focusing on the second flight. You do not want to do that when you're in the first airport and you're trying to board your first flight, right? So again, it's an analogy, but what I'm describing here is, whether people are going to resonate more with their tropical or with their true sidereal, because ultimately both charts are coordinates that will give you useful insights in what a life that you want to create looks like. So again, both of these lives are not the be all end all, and that your full potential lies well beyond what a chart can tell you. However, if you're still kind of trying to get out of the matrix, trying to get out of the illusion, that tropical chart is going to be very helpful for you. It's going to be a great waypoint to get you to that's deconditioned. Then you can start to see clearly. And from there, you can start to explore your true essence that comes from the true sidereal. Once you get there, you'll probably realize, hey, you know what? This is like just a deeper layer of conditioning. It's like not even like planetary conditioning. This is like, you could say galactic conditioning or, just existing materially. But beyond this, there's a larger definition of me. That's for you to discover. And when I show people their trifecta chart and use it as a basis for guiding them towards their ideal reality. And again, I'm mostly working with that second stop, that Bangkok stop, because people who come to me have already generally worked with their tropical charts. So their lives improve immensely. These are people who are already awake, but they're still like running into issues, and astrology and human design are not answering things for them. I show them the true sidereal. We use it as a basis. We don't rigidly adhere to it. But what I end up seeing is health issues often clear up. Confusing situations around, a person's life, maybe it's their work life, what they should be doing for work, etc. They come to a resolution. They're also able to get their needs met better, express themselves better because they can relate more authentically with other people. So the conditions around their lives often change when they embrace sort of the TRIFECTA system that uses true sidereal. So TRIFECTA is a system I created that uses the true sidereal zodiac and synthesizes human design, astrology, and gene keys in a way to give you a very simple, precise, and well laid out roadmap for finding coherence within yourself. And the goal here is coherence. It's not to give you a chart, but we do use a chart because it can help you to basically focus on the things in the areas of greatest need. So if you want to get started with this for free and you're kind of interested in what I've created here, there's a link in the description below where you can get a free reading and a free 3-day program with TRIFECTA. So you get to understand what your collective wound is, what that imprint of this world is having upon you that's causing you not to sort of see things clearly. It's a very powerful first placement. And then from there, it'll show you sort of what to do next. Because once we establish coherence and once we actually work through all these themes, we are able to heal ourselves of our core wound. We're able to basically embrace our life purpose, and then we're able to materialize that. Now, what I begin to saying is we begin to actually shift realities or timelines towards an ideal reality. And what I define as an ideal reality is one where there isn't a risk of planetary destruction, where the environment is, able to help you express yourself freely and support that. And also too, where you can feel like you're supported in expressing yourself freely. The conditions of your life are not limiting in any way. And the process for getting there is something what I call quantum drifting versus quantum jumping. So quantum jumping is like an instantaneous, like you literally go from here and you pop into sort of like a different reality. That's a thing, and I think it's very trendy right now. Quantum drifting is more drifting through parallel realities progressively until we arrive at our ideal reality. And this is what happens more often for people. So quantum drifting is, you don't even have to really pay attention. You will notice when this process is happening. But if you can imagine us in a bubble in this reality, so this is our universe, and that there's, in the multiverse theory, that there's an infinite number of these bubbles, and they all have slightly different characteristics. It's like one different decision that you made or somebody else made. And so every probability has played out in all of these different parallel universes. Now, oftentimes we're trapped in the one we're in, but we actually can move between them based on where we're placing our attention and energy and taking action in that direction. So we actually begin to drift through ones where maybe the environment isn't in danger anymore, and the world sort of starts to regenerate itself. People are more awake. Governments don't have a heavy hand. There isn't sort of incidents of war. So basically, instead of trying to go out there and physically change the world, which is a much more difficult thing to do, we